Hello and welcome in our stage 4 of our How to Draft series. I'm still LinkingX2 and today we talk about the second half of the Champion Select. In more details, how to ban out the enemy correctly and to make full use of the pick order. I'm going to reference a few videos from prior stages, so check them out in the playlist or in either one of these corners. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Before we know what to ban in the second ban phase, let's consider what one might pick afterwards, as there are different types of picks than one is looking for in the second half. One type would be team comp based picks. One of the options would be the bailouts. So bailout picks are champions that try to salvage a poor draft in the first half. A poor draft here means usually a comp that has not reliable win conditions or that can play around them in retrospect to the enemy comp. In such cases, bailouts then seek to offer another win condition either by themselves, like a split pusher or a hyper carry, or they try to change the team identity, like pick champions try to make a pick comp in the mid game. Also in the category of team comp based picks are the roundups. So if your comp is really doing fine in the first stage, you can just round up your comp, pick champions that are on the same page, the same color, or champions that either amplify what you already have. For example, that would be green color champions. In most cases, there are quite a few champs that fill in this category, so depending on how niche your first 3 picks are, you can look to a specific champion that your personal preferences do align with. Of course, you need to remember that these champions still need to be good against the enemy in the laning phase. Lastly, for the team comp-centered picks are comp counters. It's, as it sounds, if the enemy comp is very telegraphed in the way they want to play the game, there are champions that can counter this and punish that playstyle quite heavily. For example, Aphelios or Orianna versus light red comps, or long range champions like Varus against comps that have little to no engage. Picks that are more champion specific are first the flex picks, again very relevant for both sides again. So example would be if the R4 pick is not seeking to elevate the R3 pick, it can be a flex pick to set up the counter potential of the R5. On the other side, if a flex pick comes in B4 and B5, it can take the wind out of the sails of a potential R5 counter. Speaking of counter picks, this is still the point where you can look at matchups, and most notably the R5 pick can counter the entire enemy comp. So if you or your enemy have not flexed correctly, this is a point where many counter picks can come in. You know where most of the enemy champions do go. But you need to keep in mind that these champion counter picks, for the laning phase notably, are on the same color and on the same page as your team comp, and they are not stragglers. For example, win in a teamfight comp could become quite the liability as the game drags on. Now we have a better understanding what you or your opponent is looking to pick up. To counteract that, obviously you have to understand where you and your opponent ended up after the first half. Without that, you cannot really ban out what the enemy needs, and neither punish them down the line. A trick you can use to somewhat counteract a lack of knowledge or experience, again, is linked to scouting the enemy. In many cases, the enemy is not that smart either in the ban approach, so they do behave quite similar from game to game. This way, you usually can figure out how their priorities are in champion position, pick order, and for whom and for what lane they are banning. You can then predict what the enemy is going to do and ban accordingly. You have to note though, that this enemy specific banning and preparing does not make you a better drafter per se, as it's similar to punishing low elo players without knowing how or why you're punishing them. Having covered the bans, let's continue with the picks. The R4 pick, very special, but we've already talked about it quite a bit, so I'm not going into too much detail again. Just a short review here. R4 can be used to back up the R3 pick, so either by being a counter pick that the enemy might want, or by being an amplifier to further power up its strengths. It's also the first pick after the bans, so it can be set up similarly to a B1 pick. And lastly, it can also be a flex pick to keep the position of the R5 hidden to amplify and increase the power of its counter pick potential. On the blue side, the B4 and B5 pick are not only picks that see 4 enemy champions, can be effective against a great deal of the enemy comp, but they are also the finishing touches for the blue side's comp. This obviously refers to the bailout, the roundup, and the comp counter picks. The exact one you need is obviously situation dependent. but I would recommend to never use a roundup with a bailout, as they're obviously contrary to each other. But roundups and team counters can work really nicely together, and in some cases a single champion can be both at the same time. Lastly, the R5 pick. The enemy has nearly no response to this, so you have a lot of freedom with little restraint at this point. You can make use of all the mentioned picks, but bailouts are only really useful here if R4 was also a bailout. But not to repeat myself again, I will mention a bit more creative ways you can use this pick here, and these can be really effective if utilized correctly. R5 as a support counter pick, so even if the bot lane is not really that powerful in the meta, it is still a very important lane, just by the fact that it has doubled the amount of players in it. So getting a support counter pick, which is vital to the lane, is able to elevate 2 of your players while pushing down 2 enemy players. You will get double the advantage from a good support counter pick. Next, R5 as a counter pick, either for your best player or for the player with the largest champion pool. The first one might be able to solo carry the game for you, while the other one has a greater repertoire on champions, so he might have one killer counter pick to completely take out the enemy. With these options you're looking to create a 4 or 3 versus 5 advantage, but to be able to fully utilize the power of the R5 pick, only does your draft need to be completely cohesive and not dependent on this last specific champion. Also, you and your players need to identify the power of champions in the meta, and through scouting and preparation have these knockout counter picks in your pool, as there's no real use to picking a champion that you can't really play. This covers the 4th stage of our How to Draft series. I was able to show you all a few new things that one needs to keep in mind for the most important aspect of the game, as in pro play, drafting is at least like 80% of the game. And now you're able to understand pros, casters, and people like LS way more if they are molding about certain picks or comps. And if you yourself are in the situation, maybe for your Clash team, that you need to draft yourself, you also know now how to get the edges before the loading screen. If you have any questions about today's stage 4 or anything else regarding the draft process, ask away in the comments down below. And on your way down there, you might want to leave a like, and you might want to consider subscribing to not miss out on my regular content. The last stage, stage 5, where I will evaluate both advantages and disadvantages of either sides, the red and the blue one. So stay tuned for that. That's it for today though. I wish you all a great day and good luck on the Rift. Till next time.